come across when you see.
You can check on that camera closest to you what it looks like on the board.
Blue looks really good. We use red and blue.
What color's coming up best on the screen there?
I can't see
You can't.
because it's over in the corner.
If you need to pull that back a little to change the angle, feel free to. It's recording.
Yeah, that looks good. Red and blue works.
Well, I'm glad you got an Apple Watch for your birthday. Now you can't complain that you don't have one, and you got a charging case for your phone. So you have your family, even though it's cold at the beach, and it sounds like your birthday went pretty well, all things considered. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and maybe this week we can catch up and celebrate your birthday. All right, I'll talk to you later. I'm in class. I have class.
You're very low class.
That's why I wore my jean jacket today.
No, that's called a Canadian tuxedo. Except they wear the jeans that go with, and it's one
I
thing.
thought you would appreciate the effort I put into trying to look nice today.
You look like a very studious student. So should I put on the live player now?
Yes.
We're,
Wasted content.
everything's recording.
Everything's recording.
Does it matter about memory?
Every device that we're using has plenty of storage.
Okay.
And I brought my external hard drive, and I have Apple iTunes on my laptop, so we can move everything over to my computer. And then I need to find a video editing software that actually works.
Okay, so I'm not going to try to do the introductions and all that sort of stuff. I think we can film that probably separate as welcome to RMI, welcome to RMS investigation class, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to kind of dig into content so that we can actually start taking that class, because those introductions would take some time and we're not going to get into that. So, welcome class. It's good to see you all are all here and willing and ready to participate.
We're so excited.
Super excited. So let's start with the concepts of what is resilience management, what is a resilient management system, and how do we achieve that. And I want to draw you two things that I want you to take note of on the board. So when we begin to talk about people and systems, we have to take a look at how we're created in the environment, or what puts us in the situations as humans to make the decisions that we make. A real simple example I can use is if I only have a couple of choices, a 50-50 shot at getting something right, I only have two options, and I'm going to choose one of those to make something happen. So the way that kind of works is you have this nice individual here in the middle. I'm a great illustrator, by the way. So people, when we start talking about people, they have their own influences and things that they have brought to the table with them naturally from where they grew up, their education, their network at home, their network away from home. We refer to those things as social systems. I'll make a ring for social systems. And we're going to talk about the individual, and we can talk about nature versus nurture just a little bit. But when we talk about what we're born with, we have to begin with the human and what it is, what drives a human to do what it is that they do. And humans are no different than any other animal in the kingdom, although we have the opposable thumbs, which make things a little bit easier to do. We have the ability to think and reason and we have emotions that drive a lot of our behaviors and our decision making. But fundamentally, when you look at a person, the things that drive us are the same things that drive animals to do what it is that they do. It's survivability. But survivability in the modern world around the human looks different than it does for an animal in the wild. And I use a deer as an example. A deer, if you've ever seen a deer in the wild, they are a plant eater. They are somewhere on the food chain for a lot of different animals because they are a very good food source for things like mountain lions, people, anything that can take them down. That's a big animal with a lot of meat. So when we talk about an animal with their survival instincts, they're constantly doing a few things. And I'll write them up here to the left because this relates to resilience engineering. They're putting into action some of the concepts from resilience engineering. One, they anticipate their environment. They also monitor their environment. They know how to respond or have a plan to respond. And they also learn. These are the 4 concepts from resilience engineering. And when you relate these to an animal, if I observe a deer in the field munching on the clover, having a good time, you can watch a deer for a moment, and have you ever seen a deer in the wild?
Yes.
What are some of the things that you've noticed about a deer that they do while they're out there munching on the clover?
They look up often, they observe what's around them, they listen, they're constantly evaluating their environment.
Are they ever alone?
Not usually.
Not usually. They're usually, the male deer will travel alone sometimes, but typically for a particular reason during mating season, etc., where they're hunting down other deer. But a deer in the field is constantly anticipating the risk to their environment because they are far down on the food chain. They know, although they are fast and that they can respond quickly, the response for a deer, what do you think the response is for a deer whenever it finds danger?
It runs.
It runs. That's their typical response. Male deer are a little different. Male deer will fight, but they only fight over territory in relation to female deer. But those are a couple of the responses that you will get out of a deer. You said they're constantly monitoring their environment. There are a couple other species of animals that are really good at this, and there's some videos out there that you can look at. You can catch them on YouTube. Meerkats. Meerkats are really interesting animals, and I compare them to a deer and the way that they respond or the way they monitor their environment. A deer goes down, munches on a little bit of clover. While he's chewing that bit of clover, he's looking around and he's watching, or she's watching. She's watching for a few things. She's watching for predators for her or him, and she's watching predators for her babies. That's the natural instinct of the animal. The response, they're going to run, and it's built into them to understand that they're not going to be able to really fight with another predator. So their ability to run is pretty cool, and they can jump pretty high and they can get away. Learning for the animals is probably their weak point, but animals do learn, and it's pretty clear in domesticated animals. It is pretty clear how they learn. We'll take dogs for example. Do you have a dog?
Yes.
You ever teach your dog to sit? Does he stay?
Not the first time.
Not the first time, but he was able to take the learning over repetition and figure out that there was a justification. How did you train him? Did you train him with treats?
Yes, that's what I started with, and then praise.
And for domesticated animals, they really respond to treat training really well. Instant gratification of food, one of the things that deer was out there looking for, munching on the clover. But they respond pretty well to treat training because it's instant gratification. But they can learn that even if you pull the treat away, that they will still sit. So learning within the animal kingdom is possible, and I promise you that if a deer is attacked by a predator, it will not forget. If it survives the attack, it will not forget what happened and probably will not make that same mistake again on whatever it is. If we look at back to domestic animals, and if there's anyone who watches these videos or who are very much animal lovers, please, shock collars are a methodology for training dogs. That is negative reinforcement, and that's also kind of like the deer being attacked and having a response. I promise you, if you've ever seen a dog that has been shock collar trained, they will avoid the discomfort and the negative response once they learn that, and they learn that very quickly, that they do not want that negative reinforcement. So they can learn. So animals do a lot of learning. So when we relate this back to people, we people bring things to the table ourselves. Those things we bring from our home environment and what we were born with. So let's start with what we're born with. We are not unlike the deer that we spoke about in the first example. People have a survival instinct, and that survival instinct I like to refer to as eat, don't eat. And that manifests itself in pretty simple ways that it's pretty clear that people will do whatever it takes to provide for themselves or those who depend upon them to make sure that they have food. They have the basics, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They have food, shelter, clothing. They have social environment. They have family, those sorts of things. But people have a natural ability within themselves to figure out how to find food. Why? Because that survival instinct comes into play. So when we relate the human, the modern human, we have to replace what survivability used to mean. Caveman days, caveman literally was hunting and gathering for food, whether that was plant-based food or they were going out and they were the predator to take down that deer that they could eat for a few days. So people have a natural instinct for survival. And in caveman days, it was hunting and gathering. When we fast forward into modern times, what we find is that survivability is replaced by money. It's replaced by work, the things that we do. We no longer have to go hunt that deer. What do?
We have to earn money to buy food at the grocery store.
The instinct is the same. We protect ourselves, we protect our families, and that instinct is within this person. That's what they bring to the table. Now, I'm going to say something that is probably controversial amongst a lot of EHS professionals out there. Safety is not a natural occurrence or a natural act for a human, because we're asking a human to do something that adds more steps to the process than they would naturally. So let's talk about back to the way the human is designed. The human is designed to conserve energy. I can give you a good example of that. Do you ever ask you a question? You ever go come to a place and there's a sidewalk? You see that sidewalk, and along that sidewalk there's a muddy path that's worn. That's the shorter distance between where you got out of your car, wherever you're at, and you're on that sidewalk. And you see this muddy path over across to a door, access to a building. You ever see that? People are designed to take the path of least resistance. And when we ask people to enforce safety rules and safe behaviors, sometimes we're asking them to do some things that is not the path of least resistance. It's actually adding steps to a process which puts them in a position where they're burning more energy. So we're asking to go against our nature within our individuals as a human. So let's go forward with another concept. So there are a couple of natural things we talked about. Survivability of the human is naturally in there. We will do whatever it takes to get the job done. We will also have to worry about things like we just talked about, where which one did I just touch on? We'll have to edit this out.
You were talking about the path of least resistance.
Path of least resistance. People will take the path of least resistance when we have to ask them to do extra additional things. So those are things that are naturally inside the human. What we're trying to do is ask someone to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to draw another circle around here. And these are interchangeable, by the way. It really doesn't matter which one you want to put in here. But we'll just call this management systems. So people can be influenced in a couple of different ways. Let's talk about, I'm going to go out one for this conversation. Let's talk about the management system and how a person can be influenced to do what it is that they do. When we talk about the survivability thing that we just talked about and what it is that we're asking people to do for survivability, they're trying to earn a paycheck, trying to get some money. When you work, I've worked in many different environments. I've consulted in different industries around the globe, literally, and I've found that the part that we miss is designing around the human, and that's what resilience management and resilience engineering is about. It's starting to understand the human fallibility and design systems around them that make them successful. But people, if we ask them to do a task that is going to give them that reward at the end that takes care of that survival need, they will do most likely whatever that task is, as long as it's not illegal, as long as it doesn't put them in physical harm, danger. For the most part, they will justify how they do that task and that they will get that task done. The example I use is I used to work on a lot of nuclear projects. And we have some of the greatest guys I've worked with were some millwrights. But the thing about people who are contract labor you bring into an organization, they will do whatever is asked of them to fulfill a contract. If I ask a millwright, and I used to call it heat and beat, because we would literally have to take steam engines apart, and you had to heat these big giant bolts, and you had to hit them with a big beater, a big sledgehammer, to start to loosen them up. If I ask someone to heat and beat, what do you think they're going to do?
They're going to find a heat source and a giant hammer and go to work.
They're going to go to work. And if I don't give them any criteria, some bumpers, some sort of criteria on how much to heat and beat, they're going to continue to heat and beat to get the job done. And what happens with those folks is you find out that through poor communication, through that management system, through the communication that we didn't give them, all of a sudden the guy comes in and says, "Man, my back hurts." "How'd you hurt yourself?" Well, I was heating and beating on that thing you told me to heat and beat on for like an hour. Man, that thing didn't even budge. I think we're gonna have to do something different. And the engineer's like, or the manager's like, how long did you heat and beat on that thing? We're like, man, I went at it for an hour on that sucker. What was not said may not even been intentional, but the guy in his mind is going to go get that money. He's going to feed his family. His boss told him to heat and beat. He heat and beat. But we can create systems and create people who understand how to speak a different language to put the parameters in place with better communication to make sure that that person doesn't get in that situation. We can give work instructions like, hey Joe, your job today is going to be to work on the steam turbine. We're going to heat and beat on these bolts today. But however, in the pre-task plan, I want you to make sure that we plan in the breaks. I want you to heat and beat for 10 minutes. And if that doesn't work, I want you to take a break. I want you to heat and beat for another 15 minutes. If that doesn't work, I want you to come get me. Anticipate the risk. Monitor, it worked, didn't work. Response, come get me. We're going to figure out something different. We can change the way that we instruct individuals to get more out of them and set them up for success. That's the management system. We're going to go through an exercise here in a minute and talk and kind of illustrate this a little bit better as well. But let's talk about the social system. What's the other thing that influences people? I like to use an example, and I apologize if anybody's from Texas. I want to talk about Texas for just a minute. Nothing bad, but done a lot of jobs in Texas. And while I'm in Texas, you come in and guys love their trucks. And some guy will come in with this brand new pickup, and it's all jacked up. He's got these big tires on it, and the windows are tinted, and this thing, it's got lights and things. You know, it's a really nice looking, pretty redneck truck that he's bringing in. If you're there long enough, what's the next thing that's going to happen is somebody else on that site or one of the friends in his social network that he is with, it's the bigger, badder version of that truck. Next thing you know, this one comes in, it's got lights that can shoot to the moon, it's got bigger tires. It's like one guy comes in with a belt buckle this size, the next guy comes in, it's a little bit bigger. Next thing you know, some guy comes in with a belt buckle the size of a small pizza, just looks like a serving tray. And it's just because that social influence we have on each other is very strong. And how that plays in the work environment when we start talking about people, let me ask you the question, do you think that social influences individual behavior and the choices we make?
Yes, absolutely.
How do you think so? Could you think of an example?
Well, envy is what you just went through, where somebody is envious of something they have, so they go get that or they get better.
Mm-hmm. I've seen examples on project sites where guys will come in and strong personalities drive a lot of behaviors too, and you have to be careful with that. That's also part of that social environment. And if the manager or the direct supervisor of a group is what I would refer to as a cowboy, he's the get it done kind of guy. Be damned the rules. The rules don't matter. We're going to get it accomplished. The people that work for him will action just like him. It's funny to watch, and not funny in the negative way when you see some of the negative consequences that come out of these things. But one of the companies I used to work with, I used to see we had some young engineers that would go from one project to the next. And I get to see them at the different projects. And it was very interesting to see how their behavior changed from working with one supervisor. Then on the next project, they work with another supervisor. And I would see them later on. I'm like, this is not the same kid that I just, spoke with a few, probably basically a year earlier. Like, this guy's a cowboy now. He was working on a nuclear project and he was like Mr. Safety. And all of a sudden now he's in a position where he's acting as just like he would if he had never worked on a nuclear project before. Get it done attitude, doing a lot of different things, breaking the rules. And like, where did this transition occur? And it's that social environment. And that social environment is very strong amongst peers. So especially if you've got a group of folks that are working very close together on a daily basis, and the old term that I would use is, like, kind of take it from mom or grandma, is one bad apple spoils the bunch. Lots of times attitude from other folks influences other attitudes, and all of a sudden you have this breeding ground of what people, that changes the way they act. The good news is, once we understand how people are designed and how they're influenced, we have the opportunity to influence that in the right direction, in a safe direction. We can influence and make improvements. So this is the way that people are designed, and this is kind of the concept around resilience engineering around a person. So let's talk about that person, but let's talk about putting them into a system. Because the goal with resilience engineering is that, or with resilience management system, is that I can train people to do these 4 things, but I need to put them into a system that also does those 4 things. And we've got to have an illustration where we use a car to go through that. So if we'd like to, will you be my volunteer? We're going to take a ride together. All right. So let's pull 2 chairs up. All right. So we're going to take a drive. We need to plug in. Splitter. Can you talk? Talk. Yep. All right, let's mic you up so that you can talk with me. All right. Jennifer, we're going to take a drive, and I've already pre-selected you get to be the driver because I like to kind of rest whenever I take a trip. But let's start with the conversation of, where would you like to go? Let's take a good trip. You and I, we're going to go have some fun. Where would we drive to?
Key West.
Well, let's go to Key West. Sounds like fun. What kind of car are we going to drive?
A fuel-efficient car.
A fuel-efficient car. Of all the choices you've got, we're going to go with a fuel-efficient car. We're going to drive a Prius. Since we're going to go with very fuel-efficient, we'll drive a Prius down to the Keys. Okay. We're going to take this trip to avoid, and I'm going to make an executive decision on this one for us. I'm doing the agenda. So what we're going to do is, to avoid traffic, we're going to drive at night, just to make sure that we don't miss a few things. And also, since we're just for funsies, just to have a little good time, we're going to take as many back roads as we can, avoid some of those tolls. There's a lot of tolls between where we're at in Florida and down to the Keys. So let's avoid the toll roads and take some of the back roads.
Okay.
All right. So we start off on our drive, and we're driving. since you're the driver. I'll be doing the sitting. I'll be doing the texting. That's what I'll do, and navigating. So while we're driving, what are some of the things that we're driving at night? Remember this. What are some of the things that we might anticipate about the conditions that we're driving in?
Low lighting, it's hard to see in. It's hard to see things ahead of you.
Okay.
The deers that you spoke of earlier. There's the
Gotcha.
potential for the deers to come onto the road in front of me.
Gotcha.
Other cars that are not driving with their headlights on.
Gotcha. So let's talk about those cars for just a minute. So while we're driving at night on this little 2-lane road that we've gotten ourselves onto, we see a set of taillights in front of us. And they're weaving between the lines. What are some of the things you might anticipate about that driver that's weaving between the lines in front of us?
I would assume they're either intoxicated or inebriated in some form, or they're tired.
Could be tired. Could be a drunk driver. I mean, it could be late.
Could be somebody texting.
They might be going to the party. Don't even know. Maybe they haven't even made it to the party yet. They could be texting. That's a big one right now. They could be texting and driving. If they're parents, they might also be like, don't make me come back there. Trying to take care of the kids that are behind them. That could also be one of the issues that they're dealing with. Anything else you could think of that might cause somebody to be weaving?
Medical condition.
Possibly. They could have a medical condition. Somebody could be having a heart attack. Who knows? They could be trying their best to get a loved one to a location instead of calling an ambulance. That definitely could happen. So with this, we've anticipated a lot of things about this driver in front of us. Now we got to make some choices on what we're going to do while we're driving. What are the options that we have to deal with this driver?
I can slow down and stay behind him and call the police.
We could. We could, and we could, maybe save a life. Call the police, right, and report. Maybe save the life of somebody who's having a heart attack. You don't know, and maybe they follow them. Maybe they're not drinking and driving. Okay. What else could we do?
Pass them.
That is an option. It's an elevated risk, but it is an option that we could pass the driver. We could get around them. We're driving a fuel-efficient car. It's got lots of power.
Hey, Priuses can go fast.
Surprisingly, the little roller skates that we drive called a Prius do have quite a bit of power. Okay. What other options do we have? We got a couple others.
We can stop.
We could stop. That is absolutely, we could stop and wait, let them get on down the road, then we don't have an issue. What else could we do?
Honk or flash our high beams at them to notify them.
It is an option. Maybe they're falling asleep. We could do that. Near the city, I probably wouldn't, just because if they don't know how things are going to go if you're near the city. Anything else that we could do?
No.
We could choose a different route. Maybe we go on to Waze or whatever your favorite app is, and me as the navigator, I could get on here because I'm not driving, I can navigate. And let's find an alternate route so that we don't have to follow the guy that we think maybe has just left the bar. That's always an option. So our options are risk-based from high to low. What do you think our highest risk option is?
Passing.
Probably passing that person. That would probably be our highest risk option. I'm going to make another executive decision, even though that you're driving, but I'm going to say I've really got to go to the potty. I've got to pee. So you're going to have to get me to the next rest stop as fast as possible. So in our Prius, can we please pass this driver and get on down the road, because I've really got to go, and I need a big cup of coffee because I may have to help you drive. So we're going to pass. That's what we're going to do. So we've anticipated some things about the driver. So now that we're going to put ourselves in a position where we're going to pass, let's anticipate some things about the conditions that we put ourselves in. We've got, in human performance terms, what we would call is a departure from routine. Which side of the road do we normally drive on?
Well, I like to drive in the left lane, the fast lane, in my electric car. Or my hybrid.
On an expressway, I hope so. On the 2-lane road, I hope that you're driving on the right-hand side of the road.
Yes.
And in fact, I would probably, I would really encourage that from my seat that I'm riding with you. Could you please keep it on the right-hand side? Left side's lots of fun, but we'd probably keep it on the right-hand side. And on a 2-lane road, what we're going to find is it's a departure from routine to be driving on that left-hand side. Why?
Because it's against the law?
Well, it would be against the law, but where's your edge of the road?
On the right side?
Yes. And now where's it at?
On the left side?
And that's not some place that you're comfortable or you're used to seeing that rolled edge that you might take your car off of, unless you come from the UK, which is possible, and you drive on the other side of the road. So we may have a rounded edge on that side of the road. What else do we need to anticipate about that driver? They've been weaving. Remember that they've shown some issues. So what else can we anticipate about that driver?
That they may run into me when I try to go around them.
That they may try to hit us. Okay, so if they try to swerve at us, and remember it's on my side, so I'm going to be jumping into your lap at this point. So since they're going to be swerving into my side, what are our options to deal with that driver in that situation?
Drive really fast, so it minimizes the amount of time he has to run into me.
We can try to get around them. Yeah, that's one option. What else can we do?
Hit him first.
we could pit him, maybe. We can go into him. If it keeps us on the road, maybe that's a good option.
You did choose this option.
What else do we have?
We can wait for him to leave the road.
True.
Run himself off the road if he's got.
I guess that's a possibility. I was thinking more or less we could hit the brakes and stop. That's kind of another option.
Okay.
We could back off and let him continue.
You have to pee and need coffee.
But we're trying. We need coffee. But at the same time, if he tries to run me off the road, I'm probably going to back off. There's another option. If it really gets ugly, what could we do? Could we put it in the ditch?
We could.
We could. It is an option to avoid a collision with that driver. We could put it in the ditch if we had
For
to.
insurance purposes, it may be better to just let them hit us.
It might be, but it is an option. But in our scenario, we're passing this driver. Those are the things that we have to kind of be thinking about while all this is going on. There are other things that we have to think about while all this is going on. Traffic lights.
Opposing traffic
coming at us. What about a police officer?
Well, we would only pass in a legal zone.
If we were passing really fast and we were going over the speed limit, is it possible that we'd be worried that a police officer might want to give us a ticket?
I feel like that's possible if you're speeding and breaking the law.
I would think so. I think that would be probably on my brain. I'd be thinking about, oh no, we're going to do this. We're going to
check for the popo.
We're going to do it right. We're checking for popo. There may be stoplights. We're on a country road too, and we're down in South Florida. I tell you, I know there's some things in South Florida called orange groves, and you know what they do in an orange grove?
No.
They grow oranges.
Oh. I thought you were going to say something else.
And one of the things that they use to help with the growing of the oranges is they use tractors. So sometimes in farming communities, you run across very slow vehicles, things like that. So we've got a lot of things that we need to monitor for in our environment. Now, the cool part is about all of this is that you're doing this simultaneously, all at the same time. So while we're driving, the car tries to swerve into us, we're going to make the executive choice to hit the gas and let's get on down the road because I really do need to pee and we really do need to get coffee. So we hit the gas, we get on around the car safely, no incident, and we keep on driving, and we make it to the the rest stop or the gas station that we're going to stop at. What have you learned?
I learned that
Would you-
somebody that is swerving or weaving is a potential risk, and at night my decision was to go around them, and I would probably not make that same decision twice.
I was going to ask, would you do it again?
No.
The funny thing is that most people, when I ask that question, they tell me yes. And why do you think someone would take or would make that decision a second time?
Because nothing bad happened the first time.
They had a successful evolution the first time.
Right.
And we as people, the one good thing that we can do that the animals can't is that whole learning thing. We learn really well. And when we learn a shortcut or we learn that something goes well, we'll repeat it.
Yes.
Now,
I'm very risk averse, so I may have been a bad student for this.
so when I poll the audience, how many people in here have children? There's several. What I can say is, if you were teaching your kid how to drive, what option would you tell them to take?
You would never tell them to actually pass the car because the risk level is far too high.
You
know
would
that
say
it would be
stop,
dangerous.
call the cops, take a different route, do something different.
Yes. Never take the most riskiest path.
That's typically what we would tell the loved ones that we would be responsible for. And
even though we pass the car.
even though we pass the car, and in a workplace scenario, that's risk management. That's how we have to decide how we do some things and how we choose to action, because we, as an individual, I can anticipate, monitor, respond, and learn as an individual. I can decide on the lower risk option. I can choose that. I can choose to plan better, because planning, wow, what a concept. Good planning usually prevents poor performance. You know, we can talk about what is my response going to be? How do I fail safe if something goes wrong? Because maybe we do choose the higher risk option. But I also at the same time going to say, well, if something happens, I'm stopping, or I'm hitting the gas, or I'm going to try to avoid hitting the ditch. We can make pre-decided or at least anticipated responses. And we can always continue to learn and try to take that mindset to say, I'm not going to do that again. All right. So that's how we action as individuals. And that's how an individual can anticipate, monitor, respond, and learn. So let's talk about a system, since we're kind of in one right now. We're sitting in a car, and one of the best systems or the best examples I can see of people who have began to anticipate the human is the auto industry. What are some of the characteristics of a car that put in place on some of the new cars? I don't know what you drive. Maybe you drive a brand new Mercedes, who knows? But on a lot of new cars, they have put on some very good safety features and some very nice luxuries. What are some of the things that they've put in place now?
Blind spot monitoring systems, lane keep assist,
Backup cameras.
cameras all around on like really nice cars where you can see everything around you. You can see all of the corners of your car.
Brake assist, where like you said, if you're getting too close, it brakes for you.
Yes, it has like backup and forward stopping to prevent you from colliding into something. It has, some of them have heads-up displays where the headlights can actually turn around a corner because it anticipates the corner. Or the high beams automatically turn on and off on their own.
So a lot of the things that the auto industry came across, I think really comes from the concept, again, from a lot of study of understanding the human, and that the human is the most unreliable thing in that system, the human themselves, because they have free will and they can make a choice and they can do different things. But if we give them the tools and surround them with a set of tools that can help make them successful, we have the opportunity to prevent things. The last one, I rented a car the other day, and it's the first time I didn't know this feature existed. I go to change lanes and my seat vibrates my butt. And I'm like, what's that? Well, then I change the lanes again and it vibrates the other side. Then I go to park, and when I'm backing in, it starts buzzing right in the middle of my bottom. I'm like, oh, I didn't know what was going on with the car, and realizing that that was one of the safety features they put in place. Then I found another safety feature that interested me the other day. When you get out of the car, some of them also give have a beep or a tone to help you make sure that you look in the back seat to see if you left your kids in the car.
Oh, really?
That's one of the new things, because there's been a lot of infant deaths from people leaving children in cars, and so a new feature on some of the, I think it was a Chevrolet was one that I was driving. It gives you at least an extra beep, like, hey, take an extra look before you lock it, so that you can see, is there something else in the back seat, especially and maybe it's based on weight, I have no idea, but I thought it was very interesting that it had that feature. But my point with all this is if I put an individual, this is not to make the individual, to dumb down the human, to make it to where they can't do anything. It's to enhance the human.
To design out the flaws.
To design around their fallibilities. Design around them to enhance their opportunities to make them more successful. But if we give people, obviously there is history of things being ran over by people backing up and hitting things that resulted in putting in rear cams on cars. Apparently, we're not very good as drivers at not running over stuff when we back up.
You have the most limited field of vision when you're going reverse.
Do you know what one of the, and I'll end with this comment on the system, do you know what one of the earliest advantages that was designed into the cars?
Turn signals?
Intermittent wipers.
Oh.
Designing around the human to say, hey, I don't want to have to keep doing this number to keep changing, because literally if it's raining really heavy, you would have to be engaging, the wipers. And so intermittent wipers were one of the first things, and then anti-lock brakes were one of the other ones that came into play, because we figured out, I guess, pretty early on that drivers are not very good at braking. They don't brake very well. They they can't pump the brakes. And they definitely can't do it as fast as analog brakes does. But the whole point is that we can put an individual working within a system that does the same exact things that we want the individual to do. We can begin to reduce the risk and set people up for success and put them in a situation to be safer, mitigate risk, and look for more opportunities within the organization. Thank you for your help.
You're very welcome.
You're a very good volunteer.
Do you want to take a break?
Yeah, let's pause everything and let's take a break.